So my name's Gavin Morris. I'm the director of the South African Jewish Museum, and I'm standing in the oldest synagogue ever built in sub-Saharan Africa. It's also the entrance to the museum, and this is at the heart and the home of the cultural precinct of Jewish Cape Town life. We share a campus with a library, with an active synagogue, with a kosher restaurant, a little gift shop, a Holocaust and Genocide Center, and of course the South African Jewish Museum, which tells the story of the South African Jewish community. So what you're seeing over here is items of Jewish faith. These are items from the Jewish festivals, festivals that you're familiar with from the Bible, everything from Passover to the story of Esther, Hanukkah, which celebrates the recovery of the first temple. Then these are items that are used in the Jewish Sabbath, which of course is a Friday night to sunset on a Saturday. Items that you'll find in a Jewish household, such as what we call Kiddush candles or candlesticks for our Shabbat candles. Then these are other items that are part and parcel of Jewish life. Jewish homes have a mezuzah on their door, a skull cap, or known as a yarmulke, or a kippah, which Jewish men wear when prayer, a talus, and tefillin are again items worn in prayer. And then finally, at the heart of Jewish culture and religion is the Torah. So what you can see over here is the very first Torah ever brought to South Africa. It's literally the 5 books of Moses. This is the Torah. This is the oldest one in the country. It was brought here in 1849, and it is identical to a Torah that could be thousands of years old. It's done in exactly the same way, from the most modern to the most ancient. They are identical. This part of the museum is really about the history of Jewish culture and civilization and religion across the world. But where I'm going to lead you now is actually into the story of the South African Jewish community. So if you follow me. So this gangplank over here is a metaphor representative of the Jewish arrival in South Africa. Jews weren't allowed to originally settle in South Africa, and it wasn't really until the British took over in the early 19th century that Jews were allowed to settle here. The first Jews in numbers, and I'm talking about very small numbers, 4 families, arrived with the 1820 settlers. But it wasn't really until the 1880s and onwards that we see the Jewish community in South Africa growing. This was a result of things that happened both locally and abroad. In Russia, where there were 10 million Jews living in Eastern Europe in the 1880s, a new Tsar comes into power in Russia, institutes a lot of anti-Semitic laws designed to really push Jews out of Russia. 2 million Jews leave Eastern Europe around between the 1880s and the First World War, most going west to the Americas, but about 40,000 Jews who came from what is now Lithuania came to South Africa. And they really formed the core of what would become the Jewish community in South Africa as we know it today. But in reality, the Jewish communal life in South Africa actually starts a bit before then. It starts in 1841. In 1841, there are 17 Jewish men living in Cape Town, and a gentleman by the name of Benjamin Norden calls them all together on the night of Yom Kippur, which is the most holy day in the Jewish calendar. And they have a service at his house, and at that service they decide to form a congregation. This congregation is called Tikvat Yisrael, or which translates as the Hope of Israel, and today it is known as the Cape Town Hebrew Congregation. It has been active every day since 1841 to today. Their current synagogue, known as the Garden Shul, which in my opinion is the most beautiful synagogue in the country, is our direct next door neighbor. Many of those Jews who arrived, however, from Russia first disembarked in Cape Town. Many spent their first few weeks in South Africa in District 6, and in fact District 6 had quite a large Jewish immigrant population in its early years. but by the middle of the 20th century, that population had become upwardly mobile and had moved out of District 6. And when District 6 was eventually demolished, most Jewish people no longer lived there, but many Jewish businesses were still there, and those businesses were demolished with everyone else. There are lots of interesting little stories about Jewish life in South Africa, one of which obviously is the story of Otzern. Jewish farmers were central to the establishment of the ostrich feather industry, and were very important people, and what they used to call burghers, important civic members of the Otzern town. And they were very much a part and parcel of the development of the ostrich feather industry, up until really two things which happened which destroyed the ostrich feather industry, which was the arrival of the motor car, ironically, because it changed women's fashions from used to be very big bonnets or hats with ostrich feathers. Cars meant that women's fashions changed because they traveled at higher speeds, and those hats were no longer useful. And then the First World War destroyed much of the global supply chain for ostrich feathers, and the fashions never quite recovered, and nor did Otzern from that state. Okay, so one of the other important events in South African history also impacts South African Jewish history, which was the discovery of diamonds in Kimberley. Already before the discovery of diamonds in Kimberley, there were a number of diamond-dealing Jewish families in Europe. And with the discovery of this new major diamond find, some of these families would send members to South Africa to trade in the new diamond fields. Amongst them was one of the most famous wealthy families in South Africa, the Oppenheimer family. Ernst Oppenheimer came in 1903 to diamond fields in Kimberley. While the Oppenheimer family later converted to Christianity, it was very much a Jewish family to begin with, and helped build the Kimberley Synagogue, which is still standing to this day. There were a number of other very famous Jews involved in the diamond fields. Most notable amongst them was Barney Benato, who was a partner with Cecil John Rhodes in starting De Beers. They were both founding directors of De Beers. And then roughly 20 years later, after the discovery of diamonds, we have the discovery of gold in what would become Johannesburg. Now, this is really where the Jewish community comes into its own in South Africa. Johannesburg is unique, certainly within world Jewish history, is that it had a sizable Jewish presence at the founding of the city. So Jews were there as a notable minority right from day one. The first Rosh Hashanah service, which is the Jewish New Year, it's a religious service, held in Johannesburg, was held in the same year that the city was founded. There were 500 people attending. The Johannesburg Hebrew congregation, known as the Witwatersrand Hebrew congregation at that time, was founded the same year as the founding of the city. And Jews in Johannesburg were very instrumental in the development of the city, not as miners, but as merchants and traders. They were retailers. And you can see how quickly Johannesburg grew. From 1887, there was very little over there. Within 10 years, it's a thriving city. And Jews were very much part of this growth. Not only were they very evident in retail, they were also active in the illegal economy, or in the black economy. They were suppliers of illegal liquor and prostitution in the early years, but very rapidly grew beyond that to become an important minority within the development of the city. Very much involved in the development of the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, the publishing industry, the theatre industry, and were, as I say, Johannesburg was very influenced by its Jewish community and vice versa. In the museum, we talk about the three core tenets of Judaism being education, religion, and welfare. These are things that are central to any Jewish community, and we talk about the various Jewish day schools that were developed in the city, the creation of synagogues. You can go through very many of the small towns in South Africa and find a building that used to be a synagogue. And then, of course, in welfare, charity, in the Jewish community, Jewish religion and culture is very important. And we have in Cape Town alone over 100 Jewish organizations, most of them involved in philanthropy, not only supporting our community, but the broader South African community as well. Not everything in South Africa for the Jews is plain sailing. We faced a lot of anti-Semitism in the early years, particularly in the 1930s, where there was a strong Nazi movement in South Africa. But South African Jews have have been a part of this country really from the late 19th century, very actively involved in not only the philanthropic world, but also in politics. Jews were very evident in the Anti-Apartheid movement, in the South African Communist Party, in Parliament. I mean, Helen Suzman being a great example and a lodestar for the Jewish community of South Africa. She was the sole representative in the apartheid government who stood on an anti-apartheid platform in the South African Parliament. Where 13 years she was the only MP that stood against apartheid and was personally responsible for ensuring the health and well-being of the Robben Island prisoners, including Nelson Mandela. Nelson Mandela, incidentally, was the guest of honor and the keynote speaker at the opening of this museum in December 2000. These display cabinets here list some of the most renowned Jews, South African Jews, who were central and not only to the development of their industries or their functions in South Africa, but globally as well. I'll just point out a few that are quite unique. Izzy Maisels defended the treason trialists, who's one of the most famous attorneys in South Africa. Nadine Gordimer won the Nobel Prize for Literature. Most South Africans are familiar with the music of Johnny Clegg, otherwise known as the White Zulu. Two of South Africa's most well-known artists, Irma Stern and William Kentridge. And of course in sport we have Joel Stransky, most famous for winning the 1995 World Cup in South Africa. Ali Bacher, probably one of the most renowned voices and people in cricket over the years. Jody Scheckter was a Formula One driver, and there are many, many others. Now this museum wouldn't be complete if I didn't tell the story of where the South African Jewish community came from. So if you follow me, I'll show you a recreation of a shtetl. A shtetl was an Eastern European market town. This is where most of our ancestors came from. The Jews had lived in Eastern Europe after being expelled from many places in Western Europe for over 500 years. And it wasn't until the 19th century when they started being sort of forced out of that region, and ultimately the Jews of Eastern Europe would meet their fate in the Holocaust during the Second World War. But let me take you down, and you can see our exhibit, and you can also see our school education program every day of the week. We bring children from primarily disadvantaged schools in South Africa to visit the museum, where we do a program based on the school curriculum, where we teach about the dangers of xenophobia, the importance of respect and tolerance, and comparative religions. It is the heart and soul of our museum. So if you'll follow me downstairs, I'll show you a few other items of interest in the museum. At the center of the museum, beneath our skylight, is a model of the old city of Jerusalem. Jerusalem being the physical and spiritual center of Jewish life and culture in the world. It is also the center of our museum. The downstairs area of the museum is used for our education program. It represents our Shtetl, our recreation of the market town in Eastern Europe, and a few other items. But let me show you our Shtetl, which is the highlight of our museum. So this is exactly to scale Shtetl town. This is where our ancestors would have come from. They would have lived there for over 500 years. And these were little market towns. But the more things change, the more they stay the same. This is a recreated Shabbat table, a Friday night dinner that will be found in most Jewish homes around the world. If you go to a Jewish home in South Africa or most places, other places around the world today, you'll see a tables laid almost exactly the same. These are traditional Jewish foods, but you'll notice the candles. Friday night, you light 2 candles on your table. The challah, or what we call in South Africa a kitka, and a special knotted loaf of bread that we serve on Sabbath. And as I say, this is exactly to scale. So this is based on existing homes that belonged to Jewish families in Eastern Europe. And it is one of the highlights of the museum. Another highlight of the museum is our spiral staircase, which won architectural awards when it was designed. And we have what we call the Memories Hut. This tells the story of the types of work that Jews did in Eastern Europe. Many Jews who arrived in South Africa continued with the same type of work. There were tailors, laborers, and so on. And then finally, the museum has something that's rather unique. We have a collection of miniature Japanese sculpture known as netsuke. This is no direct relation to Jewish life or culture. However, it is a collection that belonged to the father of our benefactors. It's one of the finest private collections of Japanese miniature sculpture known as netsuke in the world. We are very proud to have it on display over here as part of our offering at the Jewish Museum. And so these little sculptures are known as netsuke. They are from the 17th and 18th century Japan. They have no connection to Jewish life or culture. But the father of our benefactors, the people who built the museum for us, he used to collect these. And we discovered quite a few years after his death that this is one of the finest private collections of netsuke you'll find anywhere in the world. It's a very valuable collection. But more than that, it has great relevance to people interested in Japanese culture. And we find a lot of people coming to view this exhibition specifically. So we're very glad as a museum to be able to host this in conjunction with our historical stories and information about the South African Jewish community. There's no direct Jewish link between netsuke or the Japanese and the museum. However, there is a famous story of the Efusi family. This was written in a book by Edmund de Waal called The Hare with Amber Eyes. The Efusi family were a wealthy Jewish family in Europe. They had a big art collection. The Nazis looted the art collection and killed the family during the Holocaust. But the only part of their art collection that was able to be recovered was their netsuke collection because it was small enough to be hidden. And this story, The Hare with the Amber Eyes, became a bestseller. And that was when we realized that actually we have a wonderful netsuke collection that we were able to show the visitors. And we created this gallery, and as I say, it's become one of the more popular things to see within the museum. These truly are some remarkable sculptures. And then finally, the other thing that we do at the Jewish Museum is host temporary exhibitions. We do between 4 to 6 a year. Our current exhibition is a group art exhibition of local Jewish artists who have all donated works to the museum for a special exhibition where we have sold the items, and all the funding from those sales are going to the Jewish Welfare Services. As I mentioned earlier, our community has over 100 different organizations, many of them involved in philanthropy, and the organizations that are the beneficiary of this particular auction or of sales, art sales, is to help support the Jewish old age care, sheltered employment, and a number of other welfare organizations within the Jewish community. This exhibition will be on display for another few weeks, and then we'll move into our next exhibition for later this year. And we continually update it and keep things fresh within the museum by creating new temporary exhibitions, either from an art perspective or from a history perspective that either relate to some form of Jewish history or some form of South African Jewish history as well. So this is the heart of the Jewish Cultural Precinct in Cape Town. This is the home of where the museum is. We have the Garden Synagogue over here, which is the oldest congregation in the country. To my right, we have a Cape Town Holocaust and Genocide Center. We have a gift shop, a cafe. There is also an auditorium, a library. We have another hall over there. And this is where Jewish cultural life takes place in Cape Town for the most part. Events, weddings, bar mitzvahs, talks, film previews, anything related to Jewish culture generally takes place over here. And if you come with me, I'll show you inside the Garden Synagogue, the Garden Shul, which in my mind is the most impressive synagogue in the whole of South Africa. So if you follow me now, I'll take you into the Garden Synagogue. This is an active congregation. There are services that are held here every day, and particularly on the Sabbath. Like the old shul at the entrance to the Jewish Museum, this is this is an Orthodox synagogue. Jewish men sit downstairs, women upstairs. This building was built in 1905. As I say, it is probably the most impressive synagogue in the country. Just to give you a sense of how everything works. There's the pulpit from where the rabbi will give his sermon, but the actual service is done from what's known as the bimah. That's where they'll read from the Torah and they'll say the prayers. There'll be a cantor who will sing, and the choir who will sing from there. And then if you look over here, behind the pulpit, behind those curtains over there, that's known as the Aron HaKodesh, or the Ark. This is where the Torahs, the scrolls, are kept in the service. And Jewish liturgy, or services, or Orthodox services. If you were a Jew from 1,000 years ago and were to arrive here and walk in here, it would be familiar to you. You'd know the prayers, you would know the tunes in which they're sung, and the service would be very much familiar with you. We're an ancient community, an ancient religion that is very much still active and engaged in modern life, but very much closely connected to our traditions, our history, and our culture. And we're very proud to be here in Cape Town as one of the many minority communities that make up what is today South African society. Thank you very much.